Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third webinar of the JoinHealth Autumn Series, co-organization of the Health Cluster Portugal and the IT Health. I believe you can see Miguel Amador on the screen, who is representing the EIT Health. So today's webinar is about the European Health Data Space. And last year, the Health Cluster Portugal received an invitation from ScanBalt, a meta-cluster from the Baltic region, to sign the joint declaration towards a European common data space in health. And this was on the need for a common European health data space. This declaration was submitted to the German EU Council presidency as the voice of civil society, and the input for this declaration came from 33 European clusters from several countries, known for their innovative digital health systems, as well as from regions where the pressure of the pandemics had greatly accelerated the existing digital care approaches. So as you may see, this is a very interesting topic, and a topic to which the Health Cluster Portugal has been giving some attention, namely through its involvement in the digital health group of ScanBalt MetaCluster. So on today's webinar, we will have two complementary perspectives over this topic. And for that, we invited Dr. Lars Linkold, who is a senior advisor at AI Innovation of Sweden and regional development officer at VG region in Sweden. And he will speak about the importance of having an European health data space. We'll also have Tamara Milagre, the founder and president of the patient association Evita, who will talk about her vision of the patient role and relevance in the European health data space. So thank you so much for your presence here and for accepting this invitation. Just to let you know that at the end of each of the presentations, we'll have time for questions from the audience. So feel free to use the Q&A tool and ask your questions to these two speakers. As usual, you can also request the presentation slides by filling the survey that will be sent to you after the webinar. And the recording of this session will be available on the Health Cluster Portugal's YouTube channel. But now moving to the first speaker of this session by Dr. Lars Linkold. He's a medical doctor and senior lecturer in informatics at the Gothenburg University. And from the 1st of November is supporting the Innovation Agency in Sweden as a health data expert. As previously mentioned, he's also senior advisor for AI Innovation of Sweden and a regional development officer at the VG region in Sweden. He has a long experience in digitalization in several medical areas, and his research is based in interoperability within big data and AI, focusing on semantic interoperability driven by profession. I would have a lot more to tell you about Lars, but I'd rather hear it from him. So Lars, if you'd be so kind to share your screen and your knowledge with us, thank you very much.
Do you see anything? No?
Yeah, we can see your screen already.
With me on? Is it the presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you for the introduction, Patricia. When you hear all the things you are doing, you really try to understand, can you really do it? But I guess when you have been around for a while, you have your fingers in a lot of things. And I've been very interested in understanding the use of health data, or data by itself also. So therefore, I will discuss a little bit with you, or have a small lecture about the the European health data space. That is a very interesting approach to gather or to use each other's knowledge to do better performance, if we like to speak like that. So see if we can change the image here. One of the goals we have with the European health data space is that in the future, the European citizens will be better to communicate, and the companies will have a broader market to address, and we will have seamless access to health data regardless of where it's stored. So that's a very good explanation of what we would like to do. But it's not so easy to actually do that thing. So one of the things we have seen is how we promote those things, how we can actually be sure that we do this in a safe way for our patients, how we support it, how we support the research on treatments, medicines, medical devices, and outcomes. I had a meeting in UK last week, and they said to me things like, you know, Lars, every time we release a patient from the hospital, we would like to send some digital support back to them when they go home. And that's a new way of thinking on how we can use digitalization. They encourage us also to actually have more useful use of our health data. I put it in yellow there, innovation. I think it's very important that we understand the way we can innovate or doing new things with things we already have also. And the support of digital health services, and also clarify the safety and the ability of artificial intelligence in health. It's amazing to see that what we call today AI seem to solve every problem. I'm not so sure about that. I think AI has some ways they can do better things when it comes to healthcare, but mainly perhaps on the administration ways, on finding a doctor that we can visit and finding an X-ray when we'd like to do that and so on. So what is Europe? Too old and too slow. When we look at Europe, we can see we are just around 450 million people. Compare that to countries like India and countries like China, and we see we are a small part of the world. The other thing that I've been reacting is where are the people and in what age are they? So as you see, Europe, we are much more older than we are young. And Africa is much more young than they are old. So think about that when we continue our journey together. Where will things happen? And how do we make things happen here in Europe? So when we look at it from this view of the world, you can see we have median age here, and you see here in Europe, we are where we are. You are a little bit better than we are here in Sweden and Finland, where I am, and Norway. But you see the whole continent of Africa, where the young people are living today. The other thing is we talk about the European health data space. And space is quite an interesting word to start to think about what we mean with space. I took the space view here, seeing that we have different stars and planets, and they are in a bigger system that we are not aware of. So when we think about health data space, we see an enormous complexity in it. But we also see the global goals, where we have number 3, good health and well-being. Good health and well-being, that is one of the goals we have for the whole human society. I just show you some of the figures where we have our data today. This is from Dr. Holger Smith into Darmstadt. It's actually from 2018, so there's been some changes. But we have over 60 platform companies. Most of them are in the US, coming more and more from China, and very little in Europe, and almost nothing in Africa. If we look at it in this way, you see the big ones: Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook, Alphabet, that is Google, and we have some big things going on in China. We have Naspers in Africa, and we have some things here in Europe also. So obviously we need to do something to be in this game, so to speak, from Europe. So why will we have an European health data space? Yeah, I guess that we all have the same challenges. The big challenges today is the interoperability. I mean, it's a difficult word to understand. It has a lot of levels, but I used to talk about it like the things in between, the things that makes things actually work on the other side. And we see today that when we have been supporting IT system coming into healthcare, they are not playing so well together. It's not so much interoperability. And we can discuss that from a lot of perspectives. We have the public trust, how to maintain and gain it. We have the silos and culture we have been talking about. We have bureaucracy and non-transparent and fragmentation and the legal frameworks. The legal frameworks is one of the topics we are really discussing a lot in the Nordic countries, how to solve those things. Because the strange thing is that a lot of patients and the civil society and individuals there, they are willing to share their things. But we are from the government have more problems on really supporting this sharing. And I think that the problem with sharing is the purpose of the sharing, how to grasp that. Because we have the same goals and objectives. All countries want to use their data reserves in a more agile manner than at present. And the thing that is important for me with the European Health Data Space is that we don't need to innovate everything ourselves. Shouldn't we use things already done for things not yet done, is what I'm used to say. Perhaps just doing it a little bit better. So just for fun, I used to say this is the way we look at healthcare today, that we are all these things, creativity, innovation, and so on. But then I'm coming from radiology, and I found this image here, the Barg Howlers on Volga from not 1973, it's actually 1873. But look at this image and we understand the burden we are dragging from healthcare. And the only thing we can do for every step we take is saying more or less, we need to be more people to drag this burden. But the interesting thing for me when I saw this image was this young man in the middle, that he actually saw something in the horizon that nobody else have seen. He saw the steamboat. So he realized that whatever he did today, he could probably do in a completely new way in the future. And that's where we are today. I think that the steamboat representing here, the European Health Data Space, it will take us from A to B much faster than before. It will take us to new destinations where we never have been. And the bad thing is that it will also take us to a destination where we should never go. Do you see the problems we have with it? The steam coming from the steamboat in many occasions for me actually represent more or less the data. So back to what I'm thinking is important to understand is the value benefits when data becomes information. Remember that data is not automatically information. Data will be a perspective, and the perspective on the data will be the information. So therefore, I used to talk about going from individual to a group perspective. And you can see if we take a patient that has a trauma, it's really important that we do a CT early so we can support him in that. But just one CT doesn't really matter over time. But after a couple of years, that CT on that person, it doesn't have so much value for the individual, but for us as a group, it has a high value. And therefore, I think it's important also that we see that the doctors need more information and they can get it when we gather them together. And together with AI, we can actually do a better prognosis on what we could do for you from a group perspective as on an individual basis. So I think we need to understand the difference between primary use and the secondary use of data. That is very important also for us to discuss. And I think that the European health data space could actually support us in manage the secondary use of data. Because when we look in the future, we understand the amount of data we need to have access to actually find new patterns, to see how we can do things differently and so on. The other thing we have discussed a lot and seen that is important is the FAIR principles, that we find our data, that they are accessible, that they are interoperable, and that we can reuse them. They are reusable for other purposes. So the FAIR principles is implemented in the European health data space, and I think it's important that we continue to discuss that. How do we find data? Everyone I talk with today, the biggest problem we have is not that we know there are data, but we don't know where to find those data. So that's an interesting twist on how the world has become. And the FAIR data, the challenge is how to be data-driven from that aspect. We have seen a lot of innovative things from the European Union here, the Horizon programs and so on. We start to understand more the care segments we can work in. It's a lot of effort doing in mental health. I think our next lecture will talk about what can be done in cancer. We have the genetics, care, pandemetics. We have, think about how much we learned the last years here on collaboration and how to work together with data. So it's quite interesting also. The other thing I'm a little bit interested is in the sensor data. Think about all the things we can start to find out. How we can actually use this type of technology to meet your individual needs and to understand you better from an individual perspective. These are the things we are fighting with from healthcare, because we have been working from a group perspective. We have looked at you as a diagnosis, and we have researched on what is the best to do on that diagnosis. But the best thing is the same thing for everyone. But today we are learning that the best thing might be the best thing just for you as an individual. And that you are also the one that could measure that benefit. So consideration for others is the basic of a good life and a good society. Consideration for others is the basic of good life and good society. And that's interesting when we talk with patient organizations and patients and civil society, that it seems that we as humans have a great interest of sharing our data for a good purpose. But it might not be a purpose to get new ads in our mailboxes and so on. So those are some of the things that might be solved with having a European health data space that we in a way can control a little bit more. I think it's important to discuss both ownership, controlling, and governance, and understand that this is three different things. In many cases, we would like to bundle them together and use them as one silo. But I think we understand that the horizontal way we can use data is very interesting for us. So when I start to look in the future, I obviously see that we go towards a personal service. We as professionals, we look at cure and care. Emphasis on personal agents is heal and deal. I mean, we will see more of that, how we actually prevent you from being sick, how we support you to avoid things that doesn't really work for you. We can, for example, see things that we have been working very good in Europe and in the rest of the world is, for example, smoking, and how we have been working out policies and so on for it. So those things we will see more and more of. The other thing I think that I used to show this image for healthcare personnel, because as you know, digit is Latin for a digit and cifra. And when it comes to data, it's easy, it's 1 or 0. But digitus is the pointing with a finger. And you remember when the iPhone and iPad come, well, for the first time we could connect to devices with our brains to our fingers, and it felt very natural for us. But we also have digitalis, that is the flower that we make the heart medicine from. And we have digitalization now that we think. So these things I used to call them the 4D. And for me, that's something about your heart. So for us in healthcare and in the society all over, the new thing we need to love is this about data. And therefore, a European health data space could be an actor in that. Looking ahead, and therefore I put a T before European health data space. And the T stands for towards a health data space. And this part is driven from Finland. And when I understood that Tidas in Finnish actually means factory, you realize that we are talking in a way about factories now that is providing us with data. So I think that things we need to point is infrastructure that can carry the data in a secure way. That's why we think so much about the European health data space and Gaiax and other infrastructures. I think that we need to do things when it comes to personalized and precision medicine and health. And then I mean not only precision medicine, but actually start working actively with precision health. That is for me more a prevention part of the journey. And also this in combination with AI needs more shared data space. Perhaps some of you are aware of Gaiax, that is also a type of an infrastructure that handles data, not only from healthcare, but from a lot of industries in Europe. And they are working in a way with interoperability. They are working with European values. They have developed a lot of methods that can be reused for us. They look at what the European aviation data sharing needs common rules. Do you know about the digital single market? We can use that thoughts in healthcare also. We need a harmonization of rules. We focus on privacy and security. We need to share the rules and common design principles. And when I talk with Gaiax, we can see that a lot of those things are starting to come in places. We see what the end user are focusing on. We see the services, software as a services, platform as a services, everything as a services. You're probably aware of that you don't buy a car any longer, you rent a car and that type of services. And we also see infrastructure as a service. How do we work with the big ones, the Amazon, Mazur, City Network? Here we could put in Gaiax, here we could put in electronic health, and a European health data space also. And I think that starting to eat the elephant in pieces, it makes it easier to define what we need in between. Gaiax is something we need between the users and the suppliers. European health data space could be something we need between consumers and producers, and so on. And I'm also been discussing with Gaiax the alignment with the European health data space. What can we do together? We don't need to build parallel infrastructures, we can reuse them. And the thing here, remember that the thing is not actually to build an enormous, huge data layer. It's the way of finding data and use the data by federation. Instead of lending or sending out the data, we can use models and algorithms to work on our data. So for example, if we invent a good sepsis algorithm, it could actually be used all over Europe if we were agreed on the data formats and so on. So we could quickly get the benefits from innovation. And what's in it for me? This is Plato and Aristotle when they were out walking. And you know, Plato, he pointed upwards saying the ID word. This is the ideal world. If everything would be like this, everything would work. And Aristotle, he points forward and say, hey, my good old friend, we have a real world also. How do we get this to function in the real world? So what's in it for me? And I used to talk about, who am I? Am I my data or my narrative story? And it's also important things that we need to consider, that we shouldn't be too technology, not too much in technology, but we need this type of interrelationship between humans. And when I meet a patient, I have the patient in focus in front of me. And the relation I have with the patient might be much more powerful than any medicine or anything. So think about that. We shouldn't be too much data. We need to be human still. That was a little bit of a philosophic, but when you work with Plato and Aristotle, it easily go that way. So I think, to start to summarize, health and healthcare will reach its full potential with new incentives and the democratization of health data. European health data space can be a piece of that. We need a cross-disciplinary collaboration, and we need to be better of sharing research data and the requirements to accelerate new discoveries. So GDPR has some good things, and they also have some bad things. And we have been answering from Europe that GDPR and researcher might not play so well together. So it might be that we need to look a little bit more into that. And to improve care and use cost with this new science, we must focus on what drives 80% of the outcomes. The non-clinical factors, both social, economic, and psychological determination of health, is what we see a lot of the innovation is coming from. A lot of the innovation is combining other data sources from the sick data that we have today and start to work with health data. Other things I see is that everything will arrive more evidence-based, and then evidence-based also from the perspective of what is actually happening. You remember that we can see these patterns and understand changes thanks to big data, as we talk about, and pattern recognition into this. So data will turn to information. Obviously, it will become knowledge, and suddenly it become wisdom. And that's in a way a trust part of it. We need to trust when we go to the doctor that he will give me good advices on how to continue to be healthy or how to work with my sickness. We understand more and more the individuals have their right to health data privacy. I've been spoken of that a lot. So therefore, it's so important that we find this way of security, that it feels safely that if we put something in the European health data space, it will be secure and not misused. And therefore, it's so interesting to do something together in Europe. Because if we do it in just one country, it might be that when we change the political arena or things like that, new things can happen around our health data. So therefore, I support the European health data space as a secure place, and also with the privacy and contribution of this. We see a lot more effort on de-identifying things. And the one that knows me knows that I've been driving a lot about that we should have the same way of thinking of de-identifying data in the whole of Europe. Because when you do it in different ways, it's easy to find a pattern if we combine them. The other thing I'm starting to be very interested is in synthetic data that is produced for a specific purpose. Because if we could build some good data cohorts around Europe, it might be that we could easily get the innovation tested much more quicker than before. Because it's rather difficult for startup companies and organizations and so on to test on real data. So talk about it and be a synthetic person. I like that in many ways. Okay, You see that. The patient engagement. I'm sure Tamara will talk much more and better than me about this, but I think that we need to engage them more into the healthcare system. We need to work together with them when it comes to the health literacy. I mean, I was born in the 50s, and I remember that doctors and nurses was coming home to my family to visit me in my home and discuss issues there. And I think that we are losing a little bit in health literacy today, at least in the Nordic countries. We don't share things, we are afraid of things, and we don't have a continuum when we meet the healthcare. So that's important things also. And the most relevant providers and patients will learn and will be conversant in data analytics and tools. They will be experts in care and delivery usage. I've been working with Hanna Svensson, that I don't know if Tamara knows her, but she's a patient advocate in Sweden. And she has rheumatic arthritis and she has diabetes. And she is also a data scientist. So she made her own algorithm on her own data to find the best way how to handle her sickness. And Sara Riggare in Sweden is also an patient advocate, has shown us figures that out of all the hours she lives on a year, it's perhaps 2 hours she needs healthcare. So if we think we know a lot about sickness and diagnosis, we know so little when we compare to individuals. If you have the time, you should check out, Google this with the person does not exist. It's all these images are fake images of people. They are generated by an AI algorithm. And it's very fascinating to see this, that we can actually build those type of digital twins and everything. And I think it's so important that we get a human relationship with our data. And this could be a good way of working with that. If our researchers, when they are looking at molecules and things like that, they could also see the patient behind those, I think it would be very valuable. So if I start to summarize this, I think the future we have of electronic health data space will be prevention and early detection. That's probably what we should focus on to lower our cost. And when you think about what I said in the beginning of we are too old and too slow, this is perhaps our biggest thing to work with. Because if we just get older, and we know when we get older, we get more sickness. And when we get sick, we need more medical treatment. And therefore, we need to better use the medical treatment in the best way. So prevention and early detection, the data sharing and governance of it. We need to understand as much as possible. Today, at least in the Nordics, we're trying to hide a lot of things about you as an individual. But the way we think in another perspective is, the more we know about you, the better we can support you, both from the municipality and the healthcare and from the countries also. We need to focus on person and patient empowerment, taking this control, how to support people to have the control. And therefore, for me, it's so important to have the control of your health also, not only your sickness. It's harder to have control of your sickness because it's not easy to be engaged in that when you are sick. And we need to connect the health data across Europe, the European health data space here, because we are too small. And we remember that we have been together for thousands of years. We have a lot of the same genetics. We are reacting on things in the same way and so on. So therefore, the more we know of each other, the more we can help you as an individual. So the genomics, and therefore we work pretty well already in Europe with the genomics. We start to work better with the technology and AI. I mean, we see more and more technology companies that works across. We see organizations like Portugal Health Cluster and Scanbalt, how they start to work more and more over more countries. And we look into this with the personal care. If you have time, this is a report that is actually giving you a good insight of what is happening in the Nordics, and they have some good advices on how to proceed. So to end my presentation, I used to say, have your space to share. Sharing is caring. With that I mean is, if you don't give a space, nobody will come there. And an empty space is the most boring thing we have. So we need to fill it with something. And I think that we can fill it with sharing is caring. So I have time for some questions now. I have good time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lars, for your very insightful thoughts and for sharing your experience on this topic. We have a couple of questions from the audience already, and I have also a couple of questions for you, or thoughts that, and I would like to hear it from you. So the first question is, if you are aware of what is being done at the EU level regarding the legal factors that may be blocking the progression of the European health data space.
I think I'm not really an expert on the European level in that sense, but I can see that we are trying from the European level to see how our investments in our support program Horizon and the programs coming after here is starting to talk with each other. So therefore, I'm very interested in seeing how the Gaiax program and the European Health Data Space and the TIDAS project will work better and better together. So that's not a good answer, but the only answer I could give.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned more than once the fact that Europe is or maybe too old and too slow. I see this from the perspective of our population getting old, but also from the perspective of how agile we can be or not, in the sense of implementing such structure. And I would like to ask you, how do you see us compare with the US, for instance, in what concerns to having a common health data space? Can you comment on that?
I think what I see when I compare us with China and the US is obviously they make much more investments. And they are more focused on deliverables faster than we are. Because we are in the European Union, even if we are a union, we are still our own local countries and so on. But the good thing to be a European is that we are quite good at bureaucracy. We know a lot about our societies and so on. And I think that could be a game changer for us, because we can follow up things much better. And we also have a way of talking together to come to some common sense. In China, you decide. In US, you are going for market shares. Okay, so you see, I definitely think we have a place here. What I'm more wondering is actually more, what will Africa do in the future? What will be the power from them? What will their contribution be to the whole system here, and so on? And I think that we learned a lot in Europe from the COVID-19 pandemic, and we could see how we actually work together, not even only in Europe, but in the whole world. It's amazing to see that we can do things faster.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm not sure if Miguel has a questions. We have another question from the audience, from Inês Cabugueira. She asks you, how do you balance an European health data space and large-scale genomic data sharing with patients' privacy issues regarding the storing and usage of their data in the databases?
I think my advice there is more this federated thing I talked about, that we don't really give away the data and put them in a big data lake or something. That's old thinking. It's more of encourage to have good harmonized metadata, so to say, so we know where we find those things, where we find those genomics and so on. And just when it comes to the genomics, it's interesting to see that that's a new type of scientists, and they are more used to share the things. And it's, I used to say that the tricky part with genomics is that it actually is not all about you. It's all about your family and all about your around there. So that's a very tricky part. Therefore, it's hard to synthesize DNA, obviously, but we can do a lot of anonymization of DNA sequences and so on. And we can just ask questions. I mean, normally when you look at it, you take some person's DNA and then you check it to all the other DNAs to see where we make some fits. When I was in the US talking with them there, it was a lot of patients that asked, if you use my genomics, please add my telephone number and my email address with the data set, because I would like to be sharing my data with people that has the same sickness as I have. So a good question and a bad answer as usual.
No, not really. It was a very good answer, and it goes actually in the direction of another question that we had from the audience about the pros and cons of using federated data versus data lake data. So I think you ended up answering also at least partially to this question as well. And I have another question for you. So you mentioned the issue of trust when regards to these new technologies and these new approaches using data as the main source of information. But I realized that you focus most on the patient's perspective, and you're an MD, and I wanted to get the feeling from you and what is your impression about the openness that physicians have towards this kind of initiatives, and as they're major drivers of this change and of innovation within this field. So what is your impression about how physicians and in general accept and trust these new technologies?
I think one of the biggest challenges we have is that we continue to train our doctors and nurses in the old way, and they meet the new world, and they don't really know how to handle that. So we need to put up a curriculum in a way that supports them to this. My son that is a surgeon, he told me, Father, you know, when I have a patient, I just have 15 minutes with the patient. I have 7 minutes I need to talk with him why he shouldn't Google. And when he leave, I Google. Do you see the things there? So in a way, it's so difficult, and it's so hard to be a medical doctor today, because the amount of knowledge that is out there is so much more that we can give back. And therefore, it's for me this type of relationship. I mean, when you think about yourself, you see how many ways you can do one thing with on. And the thing is that you choose the one that feels good at the moment. So relationship is for me a lot about trust. If you have a good relationship with your doctor, placebo will work much better. You will understand if something goes wrong. But if you just meet an expert 5 minutes and they say, take the yellow pill, and you get sick when you take the yellow pill, you lose the trust. So we are probably worse in the Nordic or in the northern part of Europe than you are in the southern part of that, but because we have really divided in. I used to say, don't think too much about processes, compare the results. Find a process that works here and now, and see that we have the same results. Instead, we are trapped a little bit in the industry thinking in healthcare now. I used to talk about moral. I mean, if you look at the IT people, they say you do A, B, C, and D. And we as a doctor, we say, hey, Tamara, you just need a little bit C today and something with the A, but the rest we don't care about. And then the IT people say, hey, you medical staff, you can't do anything right. You can't follow an easy thing to do. And we say, you are structure us to hell and da, 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 da. It was a long answer, but I think I would like to put down the focus on digital and put down the focus on relations back to healthcare. That's what we are best on. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We have a couple of more questions, but I think we should move to our next speaker, and I believe we'll have time to discuss further at the end of this presentation. In any case, I'm sure that the speakers will be available to answer these questions offline if we cannot answer them during this session. So thank you very much once again, Lars. And now we'll hand over now to Miguel to present Tamara. Thank you.
So I think Tamara will bring a nice perspective to this discussion where we're discussing European data, put data together, access data across Europe. The truth is that we have patients suffering, worried, and Tamara cannot represent better this situation as president of Evita, a patients association from Portugal, but also working at the European level with different entities on the challenge of genetic cancer. An issue that many of us may not be aware that we may have that risk, and we should be aware of that risk. And for that, we need our data to be in some way collected, accessed, and so on. So Tamara will bring us a little bit the work that they are doing in Evita on building a solution from the patient perspective, and a little bit to discuss on how this patient-driven solution in some way will fit on this overall discussion of infrastructure that is the European health data space that we are talking here. So Tamara, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Miguel, for your nice introduction and for the invitation, because it's really very important for us to go out there and talk about our patient-driven solution, because we couldn't find the answers from top down. They wouldn't give us our answers, and so we were looking by ourselves for the solutions. So what is happening here is that the history of Evita. A História da Evita is still in Portuguese. I'm sorry, it's just our history. Some of you have heard it already 100 times, others not once. So it's very important that you understand what we are talking about. The whole story started in 2008 when I took care of a 27-year-old pregnant woman that had a mastectomy in our hospital because of a already advanced triple negative breast cancer. Two paternal aunts of her had died already in their early 40s of breast cancer, and that called my attention, and I followed up her family history and her doctor appointments, and I heard for the first time, even being a nurse, about genetic mutations with a high predisposition to cancer. So that young lady got a genetic testing done because she had already a little daughter and she was pregnant with her second little daughter. And in fact, she had a gene mutation, a genetic mutation called BRCA1 from the English word breast cancer gene. So when I heard about her family history from paternal side, I thought, yeah, but what does that have to do with my personal risk for cancer? If all my paternal aunts had breast and ovarian cancer, and even my paternal grandmother died of ovarian cancer, somebody thinks that's only a thing from the mother's side, but it's not. So I went to have my genetic testing, and thanks to this meeting by coincidence with this young pregnant woman, I found out about my own BRCA1 mutation. And yeah, I had the chance to get proactive and to avoid cancer at early age and being surprised by it. Because this young woman told her doctor when she felt the lump in the initial pregnancy, I have a lump in my breast. And he was laughing at her and said, child, you're way too young to have cancer. These are changes from your pregnancy. So when she died 2 years later, when she was dying, I promised her that this would not happen to her daughters, and it would also not happen to my daughters. And this gratefulness to have caught the mutation before I could have been caught by cancer, and the promise made me then building up a patient organization. We are really super preventive. The Portuguese word evita means avoid cancer. That's precisely it. And when you know you have a genetic mutation with a high predisposition to cancer, you have a lot of stuff to learn and a lot of decisions to take. So the good news is you are not alone, because evita exists and is helping those people. So very quickly, we aim to improve quality of life for affected families, because it's not an individual disease anymore, it's a family problem, because you can pass the mutation on to your children, and you inherited it from one of your father or mother. So it's the family issue, and we want to save more lives and finally end hereditary cancer. So there are two different scenarios of hereditary cancer. This is previvor and survivor. So this is me, I'm a previvor, happy, healthy with my two little daughters. And then you have this scenario. This is the survivor. And the super preoccupied daughter with the fear that her mother can die way too soon, leaving her alone in the middle of growth and her teenage years, and so many fears and questions to discuss with her mother. So when we talk about a previvor, that's a healthy survivor with the predisposition to develop hereditary cancer. There are decisions to take. Some personal decisions are special screening program, first of all. So when you are identified, you do not start the populational screening at 50. You start decades earlier, because a very typical sign of hereditary cancer is precisely early onset of disease. Remember, that pregnant woman was 27 years old, and therefore her doctor did not believe that she could have a breast cancer. And that cost her life 2 years afterwards. There's also a possibility of chemical partial prevention that lowers your risk for hereditary cancer, but not completely. The broadest way to prevent hereditary cancer are the surgeries, but then you need to decide what kind of surgery, when should I do it, where should I do it, how do I want to do it? There are other decisions like hormone replacement therapy, because you need to get out your ovaries. That is not an option. We still don't have early detection for ovarian cancer, even in 2021. We have digital twins, but we cannot prevent ovarian cancer other than taking them out. And also on familial decisions, there is this communication thing. So how do I tell my parents? One of them will feel guilty because he passed me the mutation. How will I talk to my partner? Because I have decisions to take. How do I talk to my children? I may have passed on this mutation. So then there is family planning. We can do a pre-implantation genetic testing to end a mutation in the family. So it's very important you are aware of this kind of stuff. And the survivor is a patient and often very sick with hereditary cancer. Due to early onset of disease, as we saw, it's often late stage diagnosis we have in our cancer patients. And so there are treatment decisions to do. We have some very few target therapies commercialized that improve significantly quality of life and overall survival. The cancer surgery, and there may be a remaining preventive actions to do. The oncofertility, as they are all at childbearing age, they may want to have more children afterwards. They need to know about oncofertility options and need to do those treatment if that's applicable. Very often the oncologists want to start immediately chemotherapy, and then you cannot do any more those procedures to prevent your fertility. Communication is the same kind of stuff. You have to talk to everybody in your family, first and second degree family members, because you need them to know that there is something in the family that explains why everybody died of cancer in the family. And then there's this huge difference, the never-ending fear and anxiety. Once a cancer patient, you never again get rid of the fear that it comes back. That I can assure you. So very quickly, it's a 50-50 chance to inherit the mutation because it's autosomic dominant germline mutation. It's red or black, get it or not. And then there is one green spot. Those are the in novo mutations that start with the embryo at the time of conception. That is mainly the case with pediatric childhood cancer, because 10% of childhood cancer has also hereditary origin. And then 10% of the most frequent cancers in Europe, colorectal, prostate, and breast cancer, have a hereditary origin. So this is a huge number we are talking about, and we should not ignore that any longer. What is suspicious, when you have this strong family history like mine, remember I had all my paternal aunts and grandmother died of breast and ovarian cancer, so something must be wrong. Then also early onset of disease, it happened all before menopause, for example. Then if you have at the time of diagnosis in both breasts, for example, cancer, if you have more than one primary cancer in one person, and there are certain molecular subtypes of cancer that are also indication that it may be hereditary cancer. So hereditary cancer in numbers, no numbers, in fact, available because we do not have registries about this. So those are the numbers, and this 20 to 30% of the gene carriers are identified. That means the other way around, that 80% of the gene carriers are not identified yet, and it could run even in your family. So we also miss 50% of the gene carriers because they do not have an evident family history. And it strikes during the peak of patients' productivity and childbearing years. It's the most expensive. A 27-year-old metastatic breast cancer patient that dies at 29 is obviously 10 or more times more expensive than a sporadic cancer that happens when you are already with your productive and childbearing years at your back. So we are taking care of that proof with a study that is starting right in this moment in partnership with EHDS, the Hospital São João, IPO Lisbon, Nova Medical School Lisbon, Nova School of Business and Economics. So we ran after them for years, and now it's kicking off because we won 2 prizes, 2 scholarships to do this project. You know, the public funding is really very, very poor for patient organizations, for patient-driven investigation. It's really almost not existing. So it was a hard fight, but we got it. And we hope to present first numbers in 1 year. And then we have other arguments for decision makers and finances that they allocate more resources to hereditary cancer, because it's perfectly avoidable and at least early detectable, and identified mutation carriers can choose between those 3 things I told you already. So please prevent the preventable and save more lives. Unmet needs are definitely lack of data, the under-identification, super long waiting times for testing and preventive surgeries. There is in between are gene panels available that are not being done for the patients. So when there is a breast cancer history, they get only the BRCA gene tested, but there are more highly penetrant genes involved in between. Everybody that was tested before 2015 must get tested again for the other genes, because we have all already new knowledge, and so we need to act on that. So in answer to those unmet needs of our hereditary cancer patient community and their families, Evita contacted with the National Registry of Cancer, and they told us, because we questioned them, what are the numbers of hereditary cancer in Portugal? We have no idea. Yeah, but don't you have this in your registry? No, it's not discriminated hereditary from sporadic cancer. What does that mean? It doesn't exist, in fact, okay? If you do not have your numbers, you do not exist in the decision taking part. So we decided to create data bottom up by a user-led patient registry. So the user is the administrator. When we talk all the time in 1,000 conferences in the patient centricity, that means also that the patient must be in charge of its data. I say it's because it's his, her, and other sexes in between. The user is in charge of its data. So we aim to be interoperable. However, this will be done. That depends on the will of the other party, and then the technology exists. So this is not our problem. That's with our tech experts. But we aim to be interoperable and totally centered, first of all, in any user preoccupied with its cancer risk. You know, in 2030, 1 in 2 will get a cancer diagnosis during their life. So there is a reason to be preoccupied. Now, if that happened even very early because you have a genetic mutation that is actionable, it's even more important to be aware of that. So any preoccupied with cancer risk. Second, for any gene carrier, luckily still healthy or unfortunately already sick. And we want all cancer patients on board, because we believe that we gain new knowledge regarding the assessment of a potential genetic mutation in the family. Once we have 50% of the gene carriers lost because they do not have an evident family history, because families are small, because families don't talk, because whatever, we need to find new ways to track them down and understand why are they at high risk for a genetic mutation besides not having a strong family history. So we think that this will generate data that at the moment do not exist at all. We have no knowledge about anything like that. And that's the difference. We are not only for cancer patients, we are mainly trying to prevent this kind of cancer. But we want all cancer patients on board because we think that we can learn a lot with the natural history of the condition, not having cancer, and the disease. So we will work with artificial intelligence. The information will be structured and processed by technologies because we want also raise health literacy for those people. We want to inform them with the information they give us. And just, I call your attention because I know that already all alarms regarding data protection are ringing. I understand that. And we promise and we provide complete data protection. Now, the other thing is, all those people, they are at social platforms and they tell their whole family history in public pages where they are talking about this kind of stuff. So when we, Evita, do a post on our Facebook platform, Facebook page, we have 11,000 followers, then there comes Maria and writes, oh yeah, I had this cancer and my sister that is living in this and that town had also that cancer and so on and so on. People are telling everything about themselves and their family members publicly on social platforms. So we want to create a safe and closed space for them to do this anyways, but with moderated chats and in a form that nobody would know who it is, you know? So we have a lot of great ideas with this platform. We are sure that it will be will bring a huge value to the system. And my European colleagues from European Reference Network Centuris, Genetic Tumor Risk Syndrome, they are anxious for the platform to start because people need this kind of stuff. Imagine you have this sword hanging over your head. Maybe you get cancer at any second. And then there is unfortunately a pandemic and you are in lockdown and you are not urgent and you do not have symptoms right now. But you have to do your exams, your regular specialized exams for the hereditary cancer vigilance. I'm sorry, nobody will see you because you are not urgent. So pandemic showed that more than ever how important this kind of platforms is. We can do psychological doctor appointments. We can do genetic testing on the platform. We can give people a risk score and the need to have genetic testing. We can accelerate all these processes and save dozens, hundreds of lives with that system. So what we now are doing is with the help of a dream team, of course. So we have Prologica as a tech firm. They are doing the technical stuff, which I have no idea how it works. And I don't need to know that because they are specialized in that. We have Moai, a consulting firm that made our business plan because, like I told you, public financement is really super difficult, especially here on national level. So we created a consortium of private finances. And for them, we needed a business plan. And we also made with this consulting firm a questionnaire. We questioned all Portuguese citizens how they feel regarding data sharing and patient registries. And I can tell you we had 1,000 answers and 97% positive feelings regarding that patient registry. Regarding the data protection, we are super happy to work with Claudia Monge. She is a European-wide recognized specialist in data protection, a lawyer, and she recommended us to do the data protection impact assessment at the Commission nationale de l'informatique et des libertés. That is an online tool that helps us to assess the data protection part. So in order to help private and public organizations to comply with the RGPD, the SNIL offers a complete toolbox adapted to their size and needs. And that's true. We are working with this. We have for our first phase of the platform, of course, you cannot do everything in once. We have different phases, but our first phase is completed now. The business plan is out. Our finances are meeting and deciding how much they want to give us. And I hope we will kick off ASAP with this patient registry because it's awaited and it's very much needed. So data leads us to knowledge, knowledge leads us to development, and that brings value for the system by saving money and all over everything, lives. And remember, it could run in your family. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm shutting down now.
Thank you for this perspective and presentation. I think we have a couple of questions to you, and then we can open the floor to a discussion. Probably because I would love to see the comment from Lars a little bit on what EVIT is doing. So I have a question from the audience regarding the role of family doctors on the pipeline. So what are the challenges they have? How keen they are to identify possible risks, and then send people to do this genetic test, because this is a case of you need a doctor to start in the process. So you see.
Yes, that's an excellent question, and due to time problems, I could not really dig in this very deeply. But the family doctors, they are in the front line of identification of gene carriers because they have the whole family history in their front. And mostly they are already treating the second or third generation in a family. So they really have all the trees in front, but they cannot see them because the wood is closing their eyes. So they need education. We are taking care of that with the working group of the Portuguese Society of Medical Oncology. There is a working group called Hereditary Cancer. I'm there happily because, yeah, it's moving. Patient-centered is happening slowly, but it's happening. And yeah, we did already, we have a website that is called cancrohereditario.pt, where healthcare practitioners as well as any citizen can read and raise literacy regarding hereditary cancer. There they can find how to send a suspect to a genetic counseling and where.
Okay, then we have a question from Danielle Polonia that brings into some use cases of what you're building, and probably in the point of the sustainability and monetization of the data. That probably will come back to a question also put to Lars the sustainability of these things. And the question here goes, if you are exploring other use cases, like use the patient data to train AI apps, and in some way or create cohort for clinical trials, so things that in some way industry or startups already have to looking for and willing to pay, because we've helped them to create a commercial product. And then if they are exploring ways of the data donors benefiting a little bit from that contribution, so like micro royalties every time someone sells the app, the ones that contributed for that research and development get a little bit of it. So it's things that you've been exploring or not, and that probably this opens to the question of the overall sustainability of data.
Yeah. Excellent question. As you know, patient organizations are non-profit, and we need to sell little dolls at the street to have some money to produce some information, or then we take money from industry. That's the case in Portugal. If I would live in Norway, I would be financed 100% by the state. Not the case. I'm in Portugal. So in Portugal, we decided to go to work, to kick off, we need private financement. And where's the money? And who is willed to finance this? It's industry and diagnostic labs, okay? So we have a dozen or 15 different mega companies that are reaching out to their global structures to give us really meaningful money, because we are not asking for 2,000 euros. We are asking for the sustainability during 3 years guaranteed. And we need to contract professional teams for the data managing, and we need communication professionally done, so the platform does not die in between at the beach. So 3 years are guaranteed, and in between, we hope to generate data that start to help the auto-sustainability of the platform. Because of course, we don't want to take 1 cent from the users, okay? We think we need to offer this for free for everybody. That's a service for community, but somebody has to pay it. I have no time to sell little dolls at the street. So please, who has money, please bring it to us and help us. Help us, be with us in this project. It's a game changer, a lifesaver. It's revolutionary.
Lars, probably pushing to you, there is always this discussion of the amount of money we spend in prevention compared with treatments. And I think a lot of this discussion on health data comes on the budget of prevention and not too much on the budget of treatment often. How do you see the challenge we face on this, on developing sustainability models? Because the sustainability is not often business-wise, commercial-wise, but often on the menus. You mentioned on one of the answers that we don't spend treating people later on, that we can just invest before. So how do you see that we still need to pave the road here?
Thank you, Tamara, for a very good insight.
Thank you.
I liked your engagement in your speech and the insight you gave back there. I really appreciated data becomes knowledge that becomes innovation. That was, I liked it.
I knew you would like that.
Yeah. And Mikael, you addressed some of the really hard issues here is how to promote health. We have, most of the countries are mostly interested in sickness, and we have different models on how to finance sickness, but we don't have any good models of financing health. So there, I think we can move forward if we go like one union, like Europe, saying that this is, I mean, for Europe, it must be very important to keep our citizens as healthy as possible. And you state also, when you go to Hereditary Cancer, I mean, as you say, it's young people, and they are, I mean, older men with prostata, go away. It's really interesting, that discussion. I don't really have a perfect answer on it. I think that one of the things that we can see is the movement on we have more and more possibilities to choose our care. So it will start to be more and more interesting for countries in Europe to tell others what we can do. Do you see what I'm looking after here? And then it might be that it's a lot of private initiatives that is going out over more countries. We have different systems. You mentioned Norway, Sweden, and Finland are the same. The government pays for everything, and we have insurance companies in Holland, and we have different systems there. So wouldn't it be, I mean, we see, at least in Sweden, that we put 3% on our taxes for prevention in healthcare. So it's very little in healthcare there. And for I made in the QI chat, I said that obesitas that we have looked into cost 7 billion euro per year in little Sweden. So it's a lot of money in the system, but it's the transfer that is the complicated thing there. You see what I mean? Because at least in the Nordics, we have a budget financing. So you are really best if you just use your budget and don't do anything more. And when we then move money from sick to health, it's complicated. As you say, if we could be better in, and the good thing with genomics is obviously that the price fall of doing it has really fallen down. But you brought up something there that I think is important. You say the practitioner, what you say in English, it's the practitioner, the one closest
GP.
GP, yeah. He knows the patient, but he doesn't really know the analytics of genomics. So therefore, we send them away, and then when we get the analytics back, they are often in a form that is really hard for the general practitioner to do something with. Do you see what I mean? It's a learning phase there also, and yeah, very interesting discussion. Thank you.
You are lucky, Lars, because in Portugal we have prevention has 1% of the budget, so you have three times more. Congratulations.
But I like the way you were taking care of heredity. I mean, how it comes and so on, and you see that's why I'm so interested in understanding that we look at us as an individual, but we work also in groups. And how is it? I had a friend in a family that died of breast cancer, had 4 daughters. 3 of them were testing. 2 of them had the gene already. The oldest one had children, so she operated both the breast and the ovaries. And the youngest one didn't do any testing. So you see,
that's the communication thing. We are all individuals, even in our own family. We are all different. So my younger brother did it immediately because he's father of 4 daughters. And my elder brother has no children. He didn't care about it. But you know, this motivation has a reason, because in fact, everybody of the upper generation in my family died of hereditary cancer, because I'm the rare case of 2 BRCA1 gene carrier. So I had the paternal mutation, and my father of 4 daughters, has the maternal mutation. Both parents died, all the aunts and grandparents that had the mutation died. And my generation has the chance to be proactive, yeah. And we can end the mutation already nowadays with the pre-genetic testing, pre-implantation genetic testing. We can end the mutation in the next generation. For me, it's too late. I don't know about my daughters. I know my eldest is negative, so universe is already paying something back to me. But we have the tools right now to end this kind of cancer, and we still fail. Mary Claire King, that found BRCA1 gene in 94, she said every gene carrier identified as gene carrier only after the cancer diagnosis is a huge failure in cancer prevention. And that is a sentence that leads me through all my activities.
Interesting. We have brought up the discussion in Sweden if we should do a DNA sequencing of all newborns.
Yeah.
And it's rather difficult questions to take to your heart what we are doing and how much we hinder them in their own lives also. So that's why I talked about who am I, my data or my narrative story. So
yeah,
it's really big issues, and we talk things like this. It's always that non-profit organization has a vital role in the system, but it's also something that we bring up to the political level, because that type of changes or harmonization needs to be done on a political level.
Yeah.
Also is my thoughts. So I think
Yeah.
you work tremendously right. Perfect.
Yeah, and we have even found a mutation in Portugal. We have the highest BRCA2 gene rate in whole Europe. So that leads to another situation that we also would see to fix is, why don't we do this specific test to all our girls from 25 on? Because only with 25 it's actionable. And we could avoid so many deaths in the future. And I am with them, yeah. I see those young mothers dying every week, and I really do not want to wait one day longer to have this registry and to improve and accelerate identification of gene carriers. It's so unnecessary. Yeah.
I think our time is approaching the end. I think this is an ongoing discussion that we'll need to have. I think data is too precious, too valuable in the end. That's make difficult to create the bridges, the infrastructures. But I think that's the way moving forward, and we had here good examples of this. Patricia, I don't know if you some closing words on your side.
Yeah, so thank you. And once again, thank you so much, Tamara. Thank you so much, Lars, for your generosity and collaboration in this session. As Miguel was saying, I think this is just the beginning of a very interesting and an open discussion on the role of data for innovation as a broad concept in health. Before we close, I just wanted to share my screen. So thank you also the attendees of this webinar, and I invite you to follow the updates on the program of this webinar series in our website. You may use the QR code on the screen for that, and you can also follow us through the social networks to know more about these and other activities of the cluster and of the EIT Health. And to let you know that next week we'll have a webinar dedicated to the topic of remote clinical trials and how the pandemics has accelerated and this trend. So I hope to see you there, and have a nice week.